And I guess I'll just preface this by saying that I'm an archaeologist. I'm not a digital humanities person. When I first started this project, it was very new to me, and it's been a really exciting and interesting learning experience for me as I've been doing the project, getting more into actually thinking about digital humanities and how things are done. The theme, I was under the theme social media and activism, and how that came about is, that was Anne's theme. And at the time, I had just become really interested in what was going on with open access on Twitter. And I think that, that kind of counts as activism, because it was sort of a popular uprising of academics on Twitter about open access. Certainly not a new thing, but I think, everybody was kind of coining it the academic spring last year. And that coincided with a call from Harvard University saying that they could no longer afford their libraries can no longer afford subscriptions to some journals because they've become so expensive, and with all the packaging and bundling that the publishers do. And so they issued a call, to move prestige to open access, and for scholars to please publish open access, and that it would actually be a beneficial thing. And the National Institute of Health in the US and Research Councils UK, similarly around that time last year, issued declarations and said, all research funded by us, that's funded by public money, must be published open access and be available in journals to the public that funded it, essentially. So at this time, I had just I'd had a Twitter account that was languishing for a year or two. I didn't really know what to do with it. I went to the movies. I didn't know what to use it for. So I maybe had 2 or 3 silly posts over the course of a year. But around that time, I was writing up my dissertation, so I started going on Twitter a little bit more to procrastinate, and I got really interested in this open access movement and everything that was going on, and became really interested in the discussions. But I still thought, how many people actually read academic journals if they're not academics? Or I might find astronomy interesting as a subject, for instance, or deep sea research. But I'd rather read somebody's blog about it. I'd rather read an article, a news piece on it, than go check out the article myself. Even though I'm an academic, it's not my area. So from this, my project was born, which is the Digital Research Video Project. And whether or not the two are so strongly linked, I thought, just because something's open access doesn't make it accessible. And I want to do a project that makes research more accessible. So whether or not, I guess I'll come back to this at the end, the project has been successful in terms of reaching out to the public, or it's just reached out to other academics in maybe other areas, or people who would already be interested, that's a matter of debate. But I think certainly the research projects that are covered in these videos have reached a wider audience than they would have otherwise. So the other key thing about the project itself, I won't go there yet, the other key thing about the project is that it was meant to encourage early career researchers to get involved in communicating their research. So activism, ground up people talking about their own research instead of having other people write about it. So this also coincided with reading lots of blogs and people talking about their research on blogs in an accessible way. And as being the social media knowledge exchange, I wanted it to also focus on younger academics themselves learning how to use social media for knowledge exchange and how to talk about their research through the internet. So we had a workshop as the first part of the project, and we had about 15 participants. We did want to keep it small. I was in archaeology, so it was kind of more aggressively advertised in that department, shall we say. And then some non-archaeology humanities students as well from other fields. And I have to say, I think this is a really key thing as well, because Crash does a lot of really great workshops, and I attended one around that time on social media use that was held here. But I think the people that are there are people who are already proactive and already sort of interested in it. And I think it makes a difference to then have things in your home departments that people don't have to, actually move too much. They can just go down to the common room in the department. I think, you get a little bit more participation that way, especially from students that might not be seeking it out. At that time, I'd also met the woman who produced the videos, Sarah Castor Perry. She was here at Cambridge doing Naked Scientists. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so she does radio show, podcast, and she does, they have a scrapbook, which is actually originally wanted to call, take off that title. So it would tackle questions like someone would say, how does a light bulb work? And she would answer that in 2 or 3 minutes and illustrate it as she was explaining the science. And I found that a really accessible, fun format, and I said, oh, let's do that, for research. So what she did in the workshop, I let her take it away because although I've been dabbling in social media, I'm by no means really an expert on, how to use it for communicating your research. So she did a few fun exercises. We did academic versus non-academic titles, and actually, so she took a room full of pretty much humanities people and gave them some hard-hitting, like cell biology, awful titles, or like from a endocrinology journal or something like that, and said, how would you translate this? How would it make sense to you to read this title? So that was very good. And then also, again, taking some abstracts from academic papers and trying to turn them into readable, understandable abstracts. So I think, everyone found it very useful. We had a lot of positive anecdotal feedback from that. And then leading into the larger aim of the project, we had people get into groups and pick someone's research and create storyboards around someone's research. And how would you, we're very used to, we're very concerned with being academically rigorous and, presenting at conferences and this is my data and but then it's very different from the kind of storytelling, in National Geographic, for example. So how do you get to making your work a story without losing, of course, the essential, the essence of it, and without, dumbing it down, that sort of thing. I hate to use that phrase, but you know what I mean. So they actually made little storyboards with illustrations and, what would you pair with that illustration, that sort of thing. Thinking about their research graphically and visually, I think, was also a very good help for people. And we then closed out the session with a little bit of talking about social media use and online profiles and thinking about your online persona, so to speak, and solicited from the group that was there and then later sent it out via emails and online as well, that people proposed to us video topics on their research, on their either graduate or early postdoc research. And Anne had actually suggested making a competition rather than just asking people to submit, because we thought that would garner, that would actually get people a little bit more excited. Oh, it's a competition, I'll be chosen. And we had enough money to create 4 videos. And here are the titles, the ones that actually got created, and they do have a heavy archaeology and cultural heritage, focus. And the videos, so in the previous slide, actually I showed Sarah in front of a slide which says videos should be no longer than 4 minutes, really, because after that, the audience just stopped watching. And I know myself, actually around the time that this started, I don't know if any of you are familiar with PhD comics, but he actually started a similar thing where it was like my PhD. I'm like, oh, that was my idea. But their videos have actually been a bit longer, and I see them and I'm like, well, it's 8 minutes. Like, that's a little, I'm not going to sit for 8 minutes and watch it. So the key is, 3 to 4 minutes. And I think one of the key things here was that participants wrote their own script. So for the actual application for the project, they were allowed to include a paragraph of jargon, this is what the work is. And then we also said, give us an actual script. And we evaluated, and Sarah also did have to evaluate. I have to say there were some interesting ones that we couldn't create because she did really feel like, well, not to say that it's not a good story, but it's not something that's so well illustrated. Perhaps, lends itself to some other type of media a bit better. So she did look for that as well. And, we went through and edited them after the application process as well to make sure that it would fit in the time frame. But I think that that's very important in terms of that the researchers did it themselves, because as I'll get to in a little bit of a later slide, it just seems, I think most academics I know do complain, when you speak to the media or you speak to someone else, immediately someone else translating for you, things get lost or misinterpreted. And we also, in the video, which I'll show one now, just one, it's identified clearly as a larger project out of Cambridge, so that kind of goes into the credibility. It's not just someone, stuck this up online. It's, a Cambridge project, so perhaps the people that are watching it will give it a little bit more credibility that way as well. And I'm going to show where did people go in the last ice age, because that has actually been our most popular one. I think people really like the Ice Age. It was recently Ice Age Giants or something on BBC, I think. I'm using the wrong mouse, but here. So have a look.
Hello and welcome to this podcast from the Digital Research Video Project, organised by Suzanne Pilaar Birch through the Social Media Knowledge Exchange. In this video, we're going to find out how animal bones found in an island cave in the Adriatic Sea tell us about the movement of people during the last glacial maximum from research carried out by Pia Spry Marquez. 23,000 years ago, towards the end of the Old Stone Age, also known as the Upper Paleolithic, the weather in Europe and in many parts of the world took a turn for the worse. Temperatures plummeted, rain levels fell, and a massive ice sheet slowly advanced to cover most of northern Europe and stayed there for the next few thousand years. We know that during this glacial period, many animal and plant species sought shelter in Europe's three warmer southern peninsulas, Iberia, Italy, and the Balkans. But the question is, where did the people go? Archaeological material recovered from this time period has shown that a large number of our ancestors retreated to Franco-Cantabria, an area covering the southwest of France and northeastern tip of Spain. But was this the only area where people travelled to escape the worst of the weather? Let's go back to the growing ice sheet. In order to grow, the ice mass had to take up water, causing sea levels to fall. At its maximum, when the ice reached as far south as Germany, sea levels were up to 120 metres lower than today. That's approximately the same height as the London Eye. As a result, areas of shallow sea became exposed, and Europe's shape was very different to the one we recognise. It could be that humans lived on these exposed shores during the Paleolithic, but we have no evidence of their settlements because it's now all underwater. This is where the archaeological cave site of Vela Spila on the island of Korčula in the Adriatic Sea comes in. Because the Adriatic is so shallow, mostly between 20 and 200 metres deep, when sea levels fell at the glacial peak, most of the land between what are now Italy and Croatia was exposed. So, whereas Korčula is now an island, during the Paleolithic it would have been a high point on the ancient Adriatic plain. By studying the archaeological material excavated at Vela Spila, archaeologists can find out how submerged the Adriatic plain may have been, and if, like Franco-Cantabria, it also sustained large human populations. Animal bones left behind by the Paleolithic people at Vela Spila show the Adriatic was rich in resources. Many species, including red deer, wild ass, wild boar, wolf, and even lynx were hunted. Many of the red deer and wild ass bones found had fresh breaks, suggesting that they were broken soon after the animals were hunted. So why would the people have done this? Well, archaeologists think it was to get at the soft, fatty marrow inside the bones, a great source of energy during the cold Paleolithic. But although these people were eating the marrow, there's no evidence for meat butchery and consumption at Vela Spila. Although many of the bones had cut marks to their surfaces, judging by their location and direction, they're probably from skinning the animals and not the butchery of meat. So it seems like eating the marrow at the site was more of a snacking activity rather than the main food source. Judging by all this evidence, archaeologists think that Vela Spila was a strategic hunting base camp only visited at different points during the year, and not a permanent settlement. Skins were processed here and animal carcasses were prepared whilst people munched away on marrow before they were taken somewhere else more important. The question remaining for archaeologists is, where were these more permanent bases located? And the answer to this probably lies somewhere at the bottom of the Adriatic, waiting to be found. I hope you've enjoyed this digital research video podcast. For more information, check out www.smke.org.
Okay, so that's the video. I hope that didn't seem too long. That was, I think, 4 minutes. And so there's 3 other ones, as I showed, and they've all done pretty well in terms of hits. And we've really, well, in terms of hits, I know that's not maybe the best, we'll get to that later. But in terms of sharing, they've been on the SMKE website, and I blogged about them. I also blogged about the workshop and outcomes and that sort of thing. And on our YouTube channel. I also uploaded them to Humbox, and they've been downloaded from there, so that's great. That's a resource for educators, so I think this it's very good for a general audience, especially secondary school students, so teachers can go on there and get materials. It's also on Figshare, which is used usually for uploading figures from papers as a way of sharing. And it's just this video actually has been put up on there by Pia herself. And I'll just say it's also been shared on a few different blogs. So Pia wrote about it and put her video up, and we've had Access Cambridge Archaeology wrote about a different video, and the Human Relations Area Files at Yale picked it up and talked about another video. So I think, it has, I won't say it has such a wide presence, but definitely, if people are poking around that are interested in archaeology, they might come across it. They're likely to come across it. We also publicize them on Twitter, and when I say we, I mean me, Sarah, who created them, and pretty much the people who whose research is featured. But we did get lots of conversation going and retweets and that sort of thing as well. So I have some analytics that I'll put up in the next slide, but I don't take too much stock and put too much stock in them. We also, again, on a personal level, put it on our Facebook pages, and they got hits that way, I'm sure, but it wasn't anything sort of official. We also had tweets by influential and highly influential people, as told to me by Topsy. So whatever effect that might have, I don't know. Also, I announced it to my department each time a new video came out. I encouraged the other participants, to send it on to their institutional affiliations and to email people widely, try and get the word out that these existed and they might be an interesting resource. Certainly the most widespread commentary that I've had is, that they're being used for teaching, which is, I think, good. And yeah, I kind of split this up into social media and then other media, like sort of more traditional venues. There was a radio interview of Pia when that video came out on that morning, actually, coincidentally. She was being interviewed as an archaeologist in Madrid, and so she mentioned the video, and hers has been the most successful. Like I said, I think the Ice Age is definitely a popular topic, but I think that this actually probably had some effect to her own publicizing. She was the most aggressive in sort of distributing it, and as a result she has almost 2,000 views versus the others having about 500. So, which I still think 500 views on YouTube is not too bad for an educational video. And I also presented a poster at the Society for American Archaeology, and I think this is important too because there are in general a lot of archaeologists who they are interested in reaching out and telling everyone that archaeology is not Indiana Jones and this is what archaeology really is. And so it did get a really positive reception from people who, I guess in theory support outreach, but maybe don't do it as much as they could. And I'm talking about people who are sort of see themselves as practicing professional archaeologists and excavating and not so much engaged with public archaeology and outreach. And we also had a little news feature at the University of Cambridge website, the research news, solicited by me, so I thought, this will help also. It's not like they saw it and contacted me, but so that, that shows you how many times it's been shared and tweeted on the page. So I think that got some good exposure, but one of the things that I was unhappy about with that is it was this sort of, it just goes to show you again that a lot of times when you talk to someone who's reporting, things get maybe a little bit mixed up. And even though I went through the first draft and made some comments, things were then added later that were incorrect, like without me seeing them a second time, such as stable isotopes, which are featured in one of the videos being used for dating. That they're not used for dating. That's radioactive isotopes. So, of course, someone who's reading that's probably not going to know that, but for someone who works with it, it might grate just a bit. So I think that, that kind of gave me more justification. This is why these videos are really important, because it's the researchers talking about their own research in, an accessible fashion. But as for actual response, again, like I said, so, I'm not someone who's really that familiar with digital humanities, at least when I started. Now I feel, I'm getting more and more interested in kind of thinking about social media use and how to gauge that. But when I started, I had a conversation with Anne, and we kind of said, well, let's think about audiences. Who's the audience, and what does that mean, and all these kind of questions. But I didn't really consider how to measure the success or the impact, let's say, of the videos, because my main interest in the project to start with was more about the researchers themselves gaining skills through the workshop and gaining skills, how to communicate, and kind of less about measuring the impact. But then it became clear that I wanted to, find out more about how they're being used. And this is just a really basic that shows the 4 different videos. So this is the Ice Age video, and they were introduced once a month apart, I should say. So this was the Ice Age video. This one was about bones and sort of treatment of the dead. The third video was the chemical analysis of mummies in Peru. And then the fourth video was about the digitization of prints at the Whipple Museum of the History of Science and how they're digitizing and conserving these prints. And then the black line is the tweets. So I just thought I'd put these together to kind of see, of course, each video debut, did pretty well, especially the Ice Age on the day they came out. But I wanted to see if further, spikes were due to tweets or retweets, and especially because it worked out pretty well with the first video that, I tweeted a couple times and I didn't want to harass people, so, laid off, and views dropped down. And then about 2 weeks later, where there's this second little spike, was when I tweeted again and it got picked up by a few of these highly influential tweeters, and it went up. But then there's this spike. This is for the same video. I don't know why that happened. At the end of March, the news article actually came out on the 20th of March, so it's not correlated there. Why did that just suddenly, happen? I don't know. I tried to also correlate spikes. I mean, there's some small ones here, so is that because, people were watching that video and then they saw in the sidebar on YouTube and led them to click there? It's unclear, what necessarily drove people to watch. And I know now, talking to people, hits, that's like, I don't know, 1993 or something, and you need to look at more robust analytics and think about duration of views. I have to say, in general, there does seem to be pretty good duration. A lot of times if people are stopping, they're dropping off the last 30 seconds, which I don't understand. Why are you watching the video and then leaving the last 30 seconds? Maybe 3 minutes and 30 seconds is the key instead of 4. But yeah, or maybe even 1 minute. I mean, I've seen some of those. They're really good. But then you might not get the same, of course, the same depth. But in general, so just some other numbers. Humbox seemed to do well, 44 hits and 14 downloads for the videos, being up 2 months. I don't think that's too shabby. And also the views, where the videos are being viewed was interesting to me. So the US and the UK were the most hits. But in relative terms, so this video was talking about research in Croatia, and these numbers are from the end of May when I last kind of looked at them. But Croatia had really high hits on the video that was about Croatia, so that was exciting. And then Serbia was the other video, and Peru another video. Oddly, the last video, which is about this curation of 17th century prints, had a lot of hits from Japan. I'm not really sure because it didn't have anything to do with Japan, but. I just thought, in terms of anecdotal response, nobody said anything negative. I don't know if that means, no one disliked them, but certainly on Twitter, we would get retweets and people would say, I love this, great project, or they would bother to actually tweet it themselves, and, which maybe does that show more engagement? I don't know. You're more willing to kind of say your piece. And I also think one of the best kind of measures that we've had is just emails or people coming up to us and saying, oh, I really like the videos, I saw your videos, and I use them in my class, or I referred someone else to them. We've, all of us involved in the project, had personal communication from more than one venue, and I know I had someone who, one of the researchers was contacted by someone who was a linguist, and they said, how can I get one of these videos made for my research? I want one for myself. And she said, well, you can make your own one, why not? So I think that has been the most meaningful response that we've had. But then that led me again to reflect on the audience. Well, then did I really achieve, my goal was to make it accessible, and certainly it's there on YouTube and will be for the foreseeable future. So it is accessible, but who's actually watching it, that's in the general public, let's say. I know I, sent it to my brother and said, show your children, your 10-year-old kids, But, to what extent are other people with, 10-year-olds independently finding it on YouTube? To what extent are people who are just searching archaeology going to find it? I thought, the Peruvian mummies, was the subject of one video, and I thought that's going to take off because everyone loves mummies, but I think they're more excited about Egyptian mummies actually than Peruvian mummies. So, but yeah, so who's searching for what? How are they going to come across this? I definitely think that it has reached a lot of people, but probably people that are in my Twitter circle, which is like 500 people. So that's not very, huge. So it's hard to kind of think about how far we've reached, but also I think the videos haven't been on that long, in the long term, in the online world. I don't know, is a month a long time? Am I likely to get more hits over a year than just in that first month, or was that first month like it for that video? As far as impact goes then, I think, one of the very important things is that the people who participated in the workshop and then people whose, research was turned into videos felt that it was very beneficial, not only for talking about their own research and also kind of putting out early career researcher, products versus, usually a lot of the archaeology stories that make it into the news are about some excavation or discovery, and they focus very much on that kind of theme rather than the laboratory research, which is seen as kind of being boring, but actually gives us the most exciting conclusions to talk about and think about. So they felt it was beneficial that, their research was more visible for them applying for jobs the next stage in their career, but they also felt it was beneficial from learning how to communicate better and from doing outreach, and all of them said that they were interested in doing more outreach in the future as a result of participating in this project, which was really their first kind of experience with it. And I also have to say that as I said in the beginning, the workshop being held in the department, I think, made a big difference for people because they felt it was brought to them. It wasn't like too much extra effort to seek out these kind of, what are they called, transferable skills. But there is this concern of the echo chamber, am I just talking to other academics who are already interested in it, or am I gaining, new people? I don't know. One of the things for the future is that we will be translating them, first just with subtitles, but then we hope to maybe do some in other languages. So I think that will be quite cool. One of the researchers is fluent in Spanish, so she will be doing those into Spanish, but we would hope that so the videos in Croatia and Serbia would be translated into Serbo-Croatian, and hopefully that would also boost. But I should also say that, the researcher who worked in Peru received research from people in Peru, communication, emails from people in Peru, not just other UK researchers. And so that goes back to the audience being, this kind of mobile thing, this, no base or anything like that. It definitely does have a global reach, and I think that's exciting that it can get back to people that are living in those countries, something they maybe didn't know. And so just further directions, I guess, just considering the replicability and also sustainability of the videos. So I asked Sarah how she made them because there were people interested, and these are just some more screenshots from the other videos, particularly like that one. She did the drawings herself, so you must have some kind of talent at first, sadly. So maybe not anyone can do it, but if you have a friend that knows how to draw, maybe you can convince them. But it doesn't really have to be great drawings. I mean, anybody really can do it. I mean, she drew this, she scanned it in with a scanner, used Smooth Draw, which is a free program, and then Adobe Premiere Elements, which is a free trial, and then it's rather cheap to own, but I'm sure you could probably find some freeware, movie editing stuff anyway. So it is fairly replicable. And in terms of sustainability, like I said, the videos are kind of splashed everywhere online. I have a forthcoming publication on it in Internet Archaeology, so it'll be placed in a repository, so, allegedly that's permanent, whatever that means. But I do wonder about the data surrounding the videos, the tweets and analytics, how lasting is that? And I have to say, because at first Anne introduced me to this Topsy, so I could see, how many people were tweeting about it and clicking on the links. But then I hadn't tweeted about the first video for 2 months or something, kind of forgot about it, was talking about the new videos. And I went back to Topsy to find, and I put the link in, the YouTube link, and there was nothing about it because there hadn't been any recent tweets. And I said, oh my God, I never saved the tweets. I don't know how many tweets there were and all this kind of thing. But then I looked up the most recent video and I realized, it only is able to index it and find it if somebody's tweeted about it recently within the last 2 weeks. And then it pulls up everything from the beginning, but if it hasn't had a recent tweet, then it won't. So I actually ended up having to retweet everything so that I could actually get the whole record back, and probably on the side got a few more hits. But so that's kind of a concern. I was not thinking about it in the beginning, but then when I went back to find this information, if I hadn't figured that out, I would have lost some of that information about tweets. As far as the future, so I've had very good response and people interested in the creation of more, but it's a matter of funding and the time and sort of effort involved. But it certainly has been a really fun project, I guess, and I've learned something along the way as well. So it's definitely been exciting, and as I said, we're doing the translations, so that's about